Hey, everybody, back with us again today is most of the gang of five. Counterclockwise is Bryant Thomas, Mark Woodford, and Kent Bryan, Kent Garrett. And missing today with us is John Woodford, who's attending his daughter's birthday party. So we'll get going with the four of us. And today's topic is our take on the second day of the January 6th hearings that featured a lot of the Trump administration people giving it some bad press. So, Bryant, you probably enjoyed all that. Why don't you start off this discussion?
Well, it was totally predictable. I mean, from my personal point of view, I think it's right on the money. I think there's very little they're going to be able to say in terms of the Trump supporters to blunt what this committee has up its sleeve. And I think you got a good example of that today, especially when even the Trump appointed people could not offer anything that was the least bit encouraging.
Or was it damaging? Mark, what do you think?
I don't think so. But kind of one of the things I want to throw out there is I kind of want to, I guess, set the record straight on why a lot of Trump supporters are kind of mad in the situation, so that you guys kind of have a better understanding from where those conservatives are coming from. And I'm going to use the Georgia election as an example. If for those that don't know, I'll just explain for the people who's going to watch this video later. In Georgia, the Democrats got caught on videotape escorting the GOP poll watchers out of the room, locking the doors, and then going and pulling out a locked closet suitcases. And we're like suitcases you go to Disneyland with, and started pulling out polls, started pulling out ballots, and started counting them. And the reason they got caught is the poll watcher for the GOP, when she got home and she saw that there was a 40,000 something jump in the number of polls and ballots in Fulton County, she hadn't signed off on that. And that's how they started the investigation. And if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to go and watch the video of those people pulling after they take the poll watchers. By state law, you're supposed to have a GOP poll watcher and a Democratic poll watcher. They escort them out, lock the doors, and start counting ballots.
All right. As a matter of fact, Georgia was highlighted today, and former Attorney General Barr, Trump's Attorney General, said that there was nothing to it, that the so-called suitcases and all that were just the bin that they always put those ballots in, and there was nothing to see here, folks. What they didn't mention, Mark, is what you just told us about how the poll watchers were ushered out and the counting was without poll watchers from either side. Kent, what do you think of that?
No, from what I recall of the actual, what they said at the meeting, at the hearing today, was that they had made a mistake. They said that they had made a mistake and thought all the ballots had been counted. The ballots are kept in these two suitcases. They're normally official ballot cases, boxes, whatever you want to call them, kept under a table. Once they realized that they hadn't counted these two boxes, these ballots, and everyone had gone home, they talked to the secretary, I guess, and said, okay, we have to count these ballots, and they counted them. Now, maybe inadvertently, as Mark is saying, they didn't call the poll watchers back. I'm not sure about that. But from what I understand from the hearings, that those ballots in those two boxes were, correct, proper ballots.
Legitimate. They were legitimate.
But can you prove it? Can you prove it? I can't prove that they weren't, but you can't prove that they are.
Yeah, they were never examined, the ballots themselves. Yeah. They're just assumed. As a matter of fact,
no, the ballots were counted.
Yeah,
but because you didn't have a safety net that would stop illegal ballots was purposely removed. And I agree, the judge made the right decision. He asked when he dismissed the case, he said, can you distinguish the counts that were illegally counted? Can you distinguish those from the legal counts? And the GOP said no. And because they were mixed in with legal ballots, the judge said, I have to dismiss the case because I'm not going to throw legal ballots out. And what the issue, I think, with conservatives is those people that clearly broke the law, and I don't care what the ruling was, clearly the law was broken and the justice system did not punish those people that clearly broke the law. That's where I kind of have the issue with it.
No, as a matter of fact, a lot of Barr's arguments seem very convincing on its face. at first glance, but when you really analyze it, he was assuming a lot of things. Like he was telling Trump shortly after election night that there was no fraud. There was no evidence supporting it, this and that. I mean, he didn't have a chance to really examine the evidence objectively or even have all the data to conclude that. So a lot of this stuff, I think, may have been accurate on its surface, but actually misleading because the complete story wasn't told about election night and thereafter.
Well, the issue with most of these states that were in question was clouded long after election night. Don't forget, we didn't call many of those states, especially Arizona, until several days after the voting. So if Barr told Trump shortly after the election that he didn't have a leg to stand on, that was premature because we didn't know.
As were a lot of his comments. A lot of what he concluded were presumptions.
Yeah, but I think, but Larry, don't you think
that everything was on the level?
Yeah,
Go
but
ahead,
don't you
Ken.
think, or both you and Mark think that the fraud thing was resolved in all those court cases that Trump lost?
All right, Kent, actually, I forget one of the people they brought on as a witness testified that at least half of those court cases were dismissed for procedural issues such as timing and lack of standing. Therefore, at least half, the evidence was not examined. And this is what I've been saying all along.
But lack of standing, Larry, is a legal, term. It's a legal procedure.
You have to have
standing.
that's right. You have to have a reason to challenge these votes.
No, Brian,
right.
the way the lack of standing works is it could be as simple as this, that if I decided to challenge the votes, let's say I have inside information about what went on in Arizona, and I want to challenge it in court. I couldn't because I'm not a citizen of Arizona. That's a lack of standing. So what I'm saying is a lot of these cases were dismissed on issues such as that, and the evidence was not examined. It never got a chance to be examined.
Well, you can't tell me that all the appeals, all of these challenges were not done by residents of the individual states. That's crazy. That would be a stupid move.
I'm not saying that, Brian. What I'm saying is that lack of standing means that a case could be dismissed for some kind of technicality, and because it is dismissed because of a lack of standing who brought it, the evidence is not examined because the case is thrown out of court, and nobody's pointing that out.
Yeah, but none of the state legislatures or the state voting agencies, challenge their results either. In addition to the court stuff.
No, I mean, there were a lot of challenges, but again, they were thrown out, lack of standing, the timing and all of that. I mean, you can't just bring a case to court and be assured that it's going to be taken up unless you cross your T's, dot your I's, a lot of these technicalities. Now, again, I'm not saying that the election was stolen, that there was fraud. What I am maintaining, despite today's testimony in the second installment of January 6 hearings, was you cannot conclude that there wasn't fraud because it's never been thoroughly examined. Mark?
Well, I want to add, Arizona and Nevada are also two good examples. State law for both states require that if you do a mail-in ballot, absentee ballot, you have to mail in a request. The state will then send you a ballot and then you send the ballot in. Under state law, when you count your ballots, you have to match up the request and the ballot. If you don't have those two pieces of paper, those votes are basically classified as illegitimate. What happened in Nevada and Louisiana, the state legislature, the state election boards mailed out absentee votes to everybody in the state. And so when the votes came in, they only had the one piece of paper, not the two pieces of paper that are required by law. But when it went to court, the judge said that was the state's fault. Those voters voted in good faith, and under good faith law, he let those votes stand. But again, is that fair?
Let me tell you a personal experience I had. I worked the election polls in my little precinct north of Scranton in the 2020 election. And we had a number of Republicans coming in, trying to vote. So we'd open the book to see the registration and all those details. Couldn't vote because election headquarters claimed that they were sent mail-in ballots, which they requested, they claimed. Everyone who came in said, I never requested them. I received them, but since I never requested it, I always intended on voting in person. I threw them out or, ignored it. So they came to vote, and those who didn't go off in a huff had to vote provisionally. And those are a whole separate form that they had to fill out, and then it's sent to headquarters. And who checks that of whether the vote that's recorded provisionally was actually the way they voted? Now, again, I'm not saying fraud, but I'm saying there were a number of things like that. And I checked around other voting areas in Pennsylvania, and I was hearing the same kind of story. So that was just one small way that the vote could have been not counted, miscounted, or whatever. And there were a lot of anomalies like that that were never really thoroughly examined.
Well, I think it depends on the state. We voted by absentee here because of COVID. And we requested the ballots from the town clerk. They sent them in the mail, and then we dropped them off at the town clerk's office with all the necessary paperwork. And we were told that our ballots were going to be counted.
Now, Brian, did you vote absentee or mail-in? There is a distinction which they're ignoring. There's a big distinction.
Well, I just told you what we did.
Absentee.
We brought the mail-in, the ballot that were sent to us in the mail down to the registrar's office.
Did you request it be sent to you?
Yes.
Okay. Now there's absentee is no problem. There's checks on that. There's a way to check it, verify, and all that. Mail-in, it's like just mass mailings.
Well, no, it depends on the state. In New Hampshire, there was a verification on the outside of the envelope that had to be matched to the ballot that was sent out before the vote was opened. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. But what I'm also saying is other states, including my state, they sent people mail-in ballots, and these people say they never requested them, not absentee ballots.
Well, I can't speak for that, but all I'm saying is that it appeared to have been done right in New Hampshire.
Kent, you're going to say something?
But I mean, Larry, are you saying that you think Trump won the election?
No, but Kent, again,
No.
What are you saying?
No.
What I've said from the very beginning, and just the other day when we were doing the podcast on the first installment of is that I don't know. I'm saying it has not been really analyzed to be decided either way, whether there was or wasn't election
I
fraud.
disagree with that. I mean, I think the fact that he went to 60, 61, whatever it was, court cases and lost 60 of them. I mean, that's indicative of
at least half of them were thrown out. And
but Larry,
Because they were brought frivolously without
they were
adequate
brought
documentation.
frivolously, and
Without
and
documentation.
there was no,
Brian,
they didn't have.
Let's talk about Michigan.
You are making an assumption there without documentation. When they were thrown out, it was because of lack of standing or timing.
Some of them were lack of standing, not all of them.
At least
Most
half
of
of
them-
them were thrown out procedurally, not because it wasn't fully documented. That's an assumption on your part, Brian.
Let's throw Michigan in there. Don't forget, in Michigan, the electors for the state refused to sign off on it because they had witnessed questionable ballot counting there in the state, and they refused to certify them without an investigation. And because they received so many death threats, they went ahead and signed it and validated the electoral votes there. To me, that sounds like you should at least delay it. I mean, you shouldn't. If someone feels like there's something wrong, don't threaten them to change their mind, and then they change their mind. Just say, "Oh, well, they voted for it. They signed off on it. There must not be a problem." I mean, did you guys see about what happened in Michigan?
I remember that.
You think that's right?
You got to keep in mind that all of the other stuff that went on in Michigan with the governor's threats and all that sort of stuff, everybody was in a fever pitch there. And the election just was a whole part of that. So I don't know who to believe in terms of saying that this was wrong and it was wrong because of this and it was wrong because of that, or it was right because of this, or it was right because of that. I don't think anybody knows the whole story.
happened?
You just mentioned the crux of the problem. You don't know who to believe. You don't know what to believe. You don't know what's verified, what isn't. That's my whole point. Here's another thing, in terms of Trump. Now, even if everything they said about Trump is true, that he wasn't listening to them, his attorney general told him it's a bunch of bullshit is the word he used, and, the nothing to it. Even if that's the case, I think it's quite understandable that Trump was suspicious, even if he had no grounds to be, although it couldn't be determined at that point. It couldn't be determined because, and he was suspicious.
But Larry, is he supposed to go out and say call it a big lie? I mean, he told a lie. I mean,
I think he used the wrong word.
Hold on. What other president would not be very suspicious that it was a big lie, that it was a fix, that it was a fraud, considering this was preceded by 4 years of a phony investigation about Russian collusion?
Well, I don't think that investigation was phony. That's where we. That's where
I don't either. I don't either.
It's not a phony.
You think he colluded with Russia and with Putin?
I think he was in bed with the oligarchs, at least. Maybe not with
Right.
Putin.
I agree.
Why didn't Putin invade Ukraine with Trump in office?
This is incredible. You guys have concluded that he was in bed with oligarchs. He was in bed with Putin.
What I said, I don't think the Russian investigation was a hoax. What I'm saying, what the point is from today's hearing, what I came away with was that, and why it was so bad for Trump was that he lied. He lied when all of his people, the pollsters, Barr, his advisors, even somewhat his daughter, said that he did not win. And he went out.
Let's not forget the polls in 2016.
Hold on. You claim it was a lie. What I'm saying is, considering the 4 years of hammering him, he had all these investigations of him, the FBI, the CIA, all this kind of stuff, that was all phony. It's been proven to be phony. Coming off of that kind of assault, I could see why he was highly suspicious. And was it a lie or just an assumption on his part that something was wrong, he wasn't getting a fair shake? And, beyond that, even if all of this is true, that Trump knew he was lying, that he actually concluded in his mind that, yeah, there's no fraud, but I'm going to put that out anyway. How are you going to hang the so-called insurrection on him? He didn't tell people to break in, to riot and all that. I mean, in a regular courtroom, which this wasn't, it was all one-sided. No cross-examining and all that. This thing would never stick unless you have a judge that's fixed or prejudiced. I mean, there's no evidence that proves that it was a fraud, that it wasn't a fraud, and Trump knew it, and he conducted this whole 7-point, according to Liz Cheney, a 7-point plan to create an insurrection with violence. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Well, we don't know that yet because we don't have all the evidence, do we?
Well, no, we don't know that. I like to hear the real evidence rather than opinions by people with no cross-examination. Mark.
Well, and the key thing here, look at this committee they put together. You have people on there. When you put a committee, you're supposed to have the GOP supposed to put 2 members on the board, and the Democrats are supposed to put 2 members on the board. The GOP didn't get to pick their people. The Democrats picked Liz Cheney and that other guy. I didn't like Dick Cheney. I sure am not going to like Liz Cheney. So the problem I have, they wanted to put Jim Jordan on there, and Jim Jordan's not making any accusations to where what happened with the January 6th. He's simply asking questions and answers. He wants to know, why did the FBI give an intelligence report to Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer that there might be a riot, but yet they didn't do anything about it? Why was security not fully staffed for that, knowing that there's going to be a massive turnout? Why was there a door unlocked there at the building that was unguarded? He just simply wants to ask questions, but the Democrats don't want those questions answered, because there might be some funny stuff going on.
He's a flamethrower. He doesn't want to just ask questions. I mean, he would have disrupted the hearings and nothing would have gotten done.
That's right. It would have been a sideshow.
But how would you feel?
Sideshow now? It's not a sideshow now?
Oh, it's not a sideshow now.
It's not a sideshow. No, by no means.
It is a sideshow. How would you feel if 5 people started accusing you of something and you didn't have one single person on that board to fight for your side? How would you feel?
Or a cross-examination.
How would you feel?
I mean, this is.
Does the law still matter?
Yeah, I mean, this is a show trial that like they've had in communist countries. Not to make a direct comparison, but I mean, this isn't the American way. This is a show for to make a political attack on Trump without a thorough examination of what went on. And again, it seems like the whole purpose here is to keep him running again, and hopefully to indict him and jail him. I mean, that's what this is all about. It is not a fair examination. And again, getting back, look, if there was real collusion, don't you think with all the resources they spent, the millions of dollars, everybody, all this investigation they had on, they would have come up with something that proved that there was Russian collusion, and it came to nothing after 4 years.
And what with the massive investigation? Who was the guy that was leading the investigation on the collusion thing? The lawyer. They spent what, $40 million, and that turned out to prove nothing happened. I mean, time after time, the Democrats make these accusations, investigations get started, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, let's totally forget. How many times that guy one guy from California said, I have proof that Donald Trump's been talking directly to Putin, and we have recorded phone calls of him conspiring to overthrow the government. Were these magic phone calls that you used to have 3 years ago? What happened to them?
Hillary Clinton.
Well, I think what happened, I mean, I think that in terms of what happened today, I think that Trump went with the big lie theory or statements, despite the fact that his advisors and the pollsters and his staff told him that he had in fact lost. I think he went with the big lie. And this was brought out today, but it was just a money-making thing for the Republicans. I mean, they said big lie. They wanted money to fight the big lie. They got a lot of millions of dollars in contributions. Plus, what was brought out today is that the money went to different places. I mean,
Who knows where it all went?
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, that was the big thing. That's why, that's
Look,
what I think is behind Trump's.
Look, Trump started whining about this election months before, saying the only way I'm going to lose is if it's rigged.
Right.
He kept repeating that and repeating it and repeating it. Why did he say it? Because he knew he was in trouble. That's why.
Brian,
all the polls showed him in trouble, and he knew he wasn't going to get away with it again.
again, that's an assumption on your part.
No, it's not. No, it's
Those
not.
are the polls.
No, it's not.
Look,
It's-
there is so much that remained clouded and not thoroughly examined. So again, you can't conclude it either way. And what are we shaping up with now if it's massive mail-in balloting again? I mean,
Well, I can't believe that they're going to have the same rigmarole with mail-in ballots in 2024 or even this November that they had in 2020. I think a lot of states are going to take steps to make sure none of that nonsense goes on. And if they don't, then shame on them.
let's hope so. But look, I mean,
But I think, go ahead.
I was going to say, if the Democrats were sincere about being fair about this, that they would have had a regular House hearing. This is the first one where it was stacked this way, where there was no counterbalance, there was no cross-examination of the so-called witnesses and all that. So that's why I'm saying it was a show trial. It was a political event. It wasn't a normal, valid procedure which the House had followed up until now with hearings. Even though the other hearings have been contentious and all that, at least you had two sides debating and examining the issues and the conclusions and the assumptions. You didn't have any of that.
I think
Wow, you had Trump's people saying that the election, there was no fraud. I mean, you had his people.
But
his
just
administration.
again, Ken, how did they know? How did they know, especially so early into the investigation?
Well, because don't forget the guy Pack said that he had talked to Barr, and Barr told him to check out what happened in Georgia. Pack did an investigation apparently and found nothing. I mean, so they did. I think Barr and the Attorney General's office did check out some of the things you guys are talking about.
Well, Mark said, part of what went on in Georgia was not even mentioned today or examined.
It
was mentioned. Oh no, it was mentioned.
Yeah.
Well,
They talked
now-
about the two suitcases.
Two
Oh, no.
suitcases. Yeah.
They talked about that today. I saw that.
the lawyer that I heard on there talked about the process, and I had to turn the TV off 30 seconds after he said this. He says, we have pollsters both from the GOP and the Democrats that validate the ballots. And I was like, that's not what the video shows. And I had to go flip over and watch Andy Griffith because I'd already got so tired of hearing the bull crap from him.
Wow.
Well, you know, what is there? There's going to be at least 4 or 5 more of these.
I think there are 4 more. Yeah, I think the next one might be Wednesday. But you know, I think he's got. I think, in terms of the big picture, I think he's going to be indicted. I think Garland's going to indict him, and I think that's going to be the next big crisis.
What should he be indicted for, Ken?
Well, I think there are 2 laws that he has broken. The thing about the obstruction of Congress, and I forget what the other one is, but there are 2 laws that I think he's broken.
How did he obstruct Congress?
With the congressional procedures. When he asked Pence to not to stop the vote,
Not to certify. Yeah.
Not to certify the vote.
Yeah. Well, yeah. By the way, a couple of those people, Democrats on that board, also would not certify it when Bush was elected.
Right.
When George W. Bush was elected. So there's more hypocrisy right there. This is an unprecedented, asking officials not to certify. Several of the people on the Democratic side of these hearings actually voted against certifying Bush, and I think there was another election as well. So, yeah, again, hypocrisy. You know, it's, look, and again, in terms of indicting him for something, in a regular court of law, if it's a fair judge and all that, there's no way you could hang the so-called insurrection on Trump. Nowhere did he tell them to turn violent, to break in, anything like that.
He did everything but.
That's a big but, Bryant.
No,
Look,
it's not a big but.
Look,
He riled him up. He got him stirred up.
not a
They
big
walked
but,
down
right.
the mall.
Like Chuck
All right,
Schumer did.
politicians-
Like Chuck Schumer.
It's Chuck Schumer. Talk about riling people up. On the steps of the Supreme Court, he says, listen to me, Gorsuch. Listen to me, Kavanaugh. You have loosed the whirlwind and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you. Now, with that kind of a contentious situation over abortion, Roe versus Wade, that wasn't irresponsible. That wasn't stirring up the crowd.
What's that got to do with Trump in this?
What?
What's that got to do with Trump in this?
I'm saying, if you're going to say that Trump riled him up by what he tweeted and all that, then what about Schumer? Would you?
Yeah, but Larry, listen to what the rioters say as to why they're there. I mean, listen to some of the interviews.
He called us. He told us to be
They
here.
say they
Trump asked him to be there. Yes. What's new with that? With political rallies?
Yeah, but did you know it's against the law for people to protest in front of a federal judge? That's why they're going to basically, already rumors are they're going to impeach Garland because he refuses to enforce the law of arresting protesters. You're only allowed to protest the courts in front of the court. There's a specific law that says you cannot do it in front of a justice's home. And Garland's going to be impeached if I had to guess.
And then if it's a red wave, which I'm not convinced it will be, because, you know, who knows what's going to happen with this when the election comes up. But yeah, I mean, Garland refuses. Look, there was a guy who is charged with trying to assassinate a sitting Supreme Court justice. And after that, the protesters are back the same evening after they arrested the guy, and Garland is not enforcing the existing federal law. So, you know, I mean, it's either, oh, we should indict Trump. Well, you know, if you're going to indict Trump because he asked the crowd to be there to protest, not to riot, not to insurrect, then go after these other people as well. Go after Schumer.
Well, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think
It's not going to happen. It's not
Of
going
course not. You know, I don't think that.
But if you want to have equal,
But that's the issue on the Hill is Trump's actions on 1/6.
and they
okay.
fall far short of him actually causing a so-called insurrection, which itself is hyperbole. It falls.
I don't know. I don't believe that for a minute.
But in that situation, what about when Trump gave the speech and told people to march over and have a peaceful protest? Key words there. He told the crowd, have a peaceful protest.
I don't remember that at all. I don't remember the word
I
peaceful.
don't remember him saying that.
And he also said, go in love and peace. Of course, they admit that when they spiel on about how awful Trump is. Look, you can't make, look, politicians rile up crowds all the time. The idea was to make your protests known about the questions about the election, whether whether it actually was fraudulent or not. It was a protest which is allowed. He never told them to get by. Now the big question is, why wasn't there more security? Why did Nancy Pelosi not bring in more?
Because Nancy.
Go ahead.
We lost your mic, Kent.
Because can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Nancy Pelosi's not in charge of the National Guard in Washington, D.C. That's the argument about.
I've got to throw this. I have to hit this. I actually Googled to actually find this out, and you're going to love to hear this. In the video, it actually says that Trump said, "quote, peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard." And it says right here in this article that the Democrats purposely removed that from the videotape. And when they got called out from it, they said, "Oh, we made a mistake." And when I hear you made a mistake, oh, it means you got caught. They're purposely covering stuff up. And I can send you the article if you want to hear it. I actually got it from a Democratic website, by the way.
Okay.
And again, Pelosi was in charge of bringing in, if it wasn't National Guard, then it would have been more police, whatever.
Capitol Police.
And Trump requested maybe National Guard. If she wasn't authorized for National Guard, she could have brought in extra police. They didn't do that. How come?
Well, you know what? How come it took Trump over 3 hours to call off the dogs?
We in our last podcast, I agreed with you there that if he was aware of what was going on, he should have been urging the crowd to disperse and all that. I don't know actually what happened. This is according to the Democrats' testimony on assumptions and presumptions. If that was the case, yes, that was a big fault of Trump. But again, he didn't instigate it.
Well, I think he instigated it, and I think he did it because he wanted them to riot, to insurrect, so he could go to his emergency powers, so he could call for a national
law.
emergency.
Sure.
And therefore, that would delay the counting of the vote, give him more time to do his PR about the big lie and all that stuff. I think it was clearly a plot all the way along.
I have a question for you, Larry. What do you think would have happened if the mob had gotten their hands on Nancy Pelosi and Mike Pence?
It might have been ugly. They might have been the ones who broke in, which largely was the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, who are on the radical end of it to begin with, and they should have been stopped at the door. The door was open. They were being ushered in, some of these people, and they're being stirred up. Again, I bring up this Ray Epps character who's clearly on tape, haranguing the crowd, urging them to go in, this and that. They didn't touch Epps. How come? They incarcerated people in solitary confinement for just being on the Capitol steps or going in peacefully when they were ushered in. But Epps, they've laid off. How come? Because there were agitators in the crowd. Who was behind that? You could speculate, but clearly the crowd was being stirred up among them was Ray Epps. You could see it right on tape. And how come he hasn't been charged with anything?
Well, don't forget, Ted Cruz asked the head of the FBI how many undercover agents were in the Jan 6 crowd, and the director of the FBI said, I cannot comment on that.
Yeah.
It seems like to me when government says I can't comment on it, it means you were doing it hot and heavy.
Yeah, see, as I've said before, my theory is, again, I can't prove this, it's speculation, but what might have happened was when they saw that Trump was going to bring a crowd there, they figured this was an opportunity to turn it into a riot and then blame Trump on it, hang him with it with an impeachment, which they did. And again, along those lines, what makes it suspicious is this guy Ray Epps and others in the crowd stirring them up. The lack of police protection there, even though they knew it was going to be a massive crowd and they're going to be Trump supporters, some of them had to be crazies, and no police protection ahead of time. And then they were actually being ushered into an open door. These are questions that have never been explored by the Democrats.
Did the ushering in of the open door, what's the time frame here? did that occur after the guy broke through the window and had access
Yeah,
that
what
way?
about the
Or
guy
did
who
it,
broke through the
did
window,
it,
Larry?
did it happen after that or before?
I
Or
don't know.
during?
I don't know the time, but considering what was going on, why would they do that? Why would they usher them in if
This is-
these were rabid,
Well,
crazy?
if the door was open, why did anybody break a window?
I
That
told
makes
you
no sense.
those were the nuts in the crowd, the oath boys and the proud boys and the oath keepers. Yeah, there were very
They brought
radical
more weapons
elements,
with
but
this.
that wasn't the entire crowd. That was a small portion of the people that showed up at that rally, a small portion.
Overthrow the government, you're not going to bring any weapons. That's
I mean, you know, an insurrection. Don't
Yeah.
ardent people, don't people usually go heavily armed and it's an actual serious assault
Yeah.
on the
No, but
government?
that's because this was a stupid, these people were idiots, that's why.
It was a stupid riot, not an insurrection. I mean, that is
The
stretching
whole plan,
much.
So if there was an insurrection, I'm sure you've seen the videos where it has people walking through the congressional halls. You know, they've got it taped off with the ropes. They're peacefully walking there. They're not kicking over the ropes. They're not going up there tearing off paintings. They're sitting there with their iPhone snapping pictures of the congressional building. Does that really sound like an
They
insurrection?
look like tourists going there on
Yeah.
a tour. I
Well,
mean,
but there were plenty who didn't look like tourists.
that's what I've been saying. There was that fringe element that was stirred up, and
Yeah.
they were the ones that were making trouble. So it was far from a planned
I think it was
insurrection by the
planned.
whole crowd.
I think the whole
I think
thing
it
was
was
planned.
planned. I think the whole thing was planned.
It was very poorly planned, if that's the case.
Well, that's
I
right.
think it was poorly
That's right.
planned. I think
That I-
people
that I
were
agree with.
stupid. I think they were
I mean,
idiots.
They were idiots, but it
And,
wasn't
and,
an
and
insurrection.
you had to know that even if Trump had not called them off 189 minutes later, whatever it was not going to last much longer. Whether Trump did it or someone else,
What do you mean?
it wasn't going to last much longer.
What do you mean? I don't know.
Someone else would have called in the guard and the extra troops to quell it.
Okay, where was Nancy Pelosi and the others?
Why didn't
Hiding.
Nancy Pelosi
She could have called them in.
Why didn't Nancy
Hiding.
Pelosi take the FBI report that said we speculate a riot to occur? Why didn't she take that report and at least pass it off to the police officers? She didn't even do that.
Well, you got to keep in mind the FBI was not run by a Biden appointee at that point because Biden was the president. So if the FBI director didn't take action, then he should be held accountable for that.
He should. How come he hasn't?
Well, you tell me.
Why hasn't Nancy Pelosi? The Constitution says the Speaker of the House is in charge of security. Security obviously fell apart. So who do you point the finger at? Nancy Pelosi or Donald Trump?
You know, again, my speculation. Again, you know, I'm not saying that this is true, but you know, it's like they wanted it to happen. Just like there's so many other things.
No, but I think the Republicans wanted it to happen, not the Democrats.
No, the Democrats wanted
I think the Republicans, I think Trump wanted more time to cause confusion. He wanted more time to delay the count.
He couldn't.
electoral college
And the
count.
sick
And
part
that's what
about
it
it
was
is
all
that
about.
that was the day, that was the cutoff day.
Exactly.
If the election was certified on January 6th, which ultimately it was, that was it for Trump. He knew the jig was up that day.
Right.
Then
He
why
knew
even
if-
start something?
No,
Why
but
even
he knew
start
if he started something because he knew if there was enough chaos and rioting, resurrection, he could call in his emergency powers and
he could not.
that would delay the attack. That would, yes, he could.
could not. At 12 o'clock on Jan 6th, the Constitution says the powers of the president cease to exist. He had no power after 12 o'clock. Joe Biden becomes the official commander in chief at that point. It does no good whatsoever to plan this out when you lose your command at 12 o'clock noon. I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
Well, guys, we're not going to solve this anytime soon now. There's more hearings ahead, and we'll be back with more analysis as these hearings proceed. So for now, thanks again, everybody out there, for bearing with us. We hope this has been interesting, maybe not enlightening, but at least food for thought, trying to bring the contentions from both sides to light, or at least to be considered. So Bryant Thomas, Mark Collinsworth, and Kent Garrett, Thanks again for joining us.
See you guys later.
Okay.
Take
Okay.
it easy.